Hello. Welcome to another episode of The Rundown. I'm Sunny Galt, and I am a messenger with United Network News. We are the official news channel for CARE, which stands for the Center for Amity and Restoration of Earth. And that's what we're all about. We're here to help empower humanity to take that next step and really build the home that you've always dreamed of, right? Not talking about a house with four walls. I'm talking about rebuilding our planet. And we believe the best way to do that is to first tell you what's actually happening on our planet right now. Because if you log in or check out mainstream media or pretty much anything else in even the alternative media, you are going to hear narratives that have been passed down from people that do not have your best interest at heart. So what we discuss is the real news, and we have a newscast that's released on our website every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Now, if you want more information on us and what we do and how you can become a member and get all of our content the moment it's published online, go to unitednetwork.earth. This podcast is a week in review show. So if you missed any of the content that we released this last week through our newscast, we are going to review some of the highlights in this podcast episode. And for those of you who aren't members, or maybe you're getting our content a little bit later because we do publish our newscast 1 week later on YouTube and Rumble, then this episode is actually going to be a preview for you because you haven't seen the content yet. Regardless, we cover all types of stories. We talk about local stories, and those are told through our field messengers, which essentially are citizen journalists. These are everyday people that grab their phones and just show us what's happening in their communities. We also talk about the new Earth, which is where our planet is going, and how we can remember who we are, because we've all had amnesia for a long period of time, and now we are regaining our memories, and how incredible this planet can be, how incredible we are as human beings, and our amazing gifts. So that's what the New Earth section of our newscast, as well as this podcast, that's what we talk about. We also talk about regional stories. These are stories that impact the people. So you're not going to hear me talk about, what governments are deciding and whatever, because it doesn't really matter, okay? They are the front people, they are the puppets, but they are not calling the shots, okay? So we talk about what's actually going to impact you. So if new laws have been passed, if there, are weather effects, things like that that's happening right now that you need to know about that's going to impact you on a daily basis, those are the stories we cover. And then we have something called our World Situation Report, and this is with Kimberly Gogan. She is the guardian here on planet Earth. So she is not a dictator or a ruler in that capacity, but she does have guardianship to help us during this transition, and she is on the side of humanity. So she comes on the news to give us an update as well. So I know this is really big level thinking. You probably haven't heard anyone talk like this before unless you've been watching our newscast for a while. So if you're new, welcome. Some of the stuff is going to seem a little bit out there, okay? I encourage you guys, stick with us. The topics that we talk about, do some of your own research. We always encourage you guys, think critically. Ask questions. Even if some of the stuff we say, even if it's really surprising, you've never heard anyone say that before, stick with it, okay? I promise you won't be disappointed. Before we dive into our stories, though, I do have a quick announcement. We have been encouraging you guys to submit a video telling us why you watch UNN. And we have an awesome production team. It's the same production team that works on our field messenger reports and turning your stories into something that we can put on the news. They will also be editing down and helping us produce these promos that we're going to create from these videos you submit. We're asking the videos to be about 30 to 45 seconds, so not super long, but just, with your phone, just kind of record yourself telling us why you watch UNN. And if you record a video, you're going to submit it to us the same way you would submit a field messenger report. A couple different ways you can do that. You can hop on our website at unitednetwork.earth. There is a button that says something about submitting field messenger reports, so click on that. You can upload your files that way. You can also email them if the file isn't too big to fieldmessenger@unitednetwork.earth. Okay. Let's get to our news today. It is March 16th, 2024. Here's the rundown of stories you may have missed this week on UNN. So let's talk about our amazing field messengers. Just for a second, I just want to brag on them because, again, like I explained just a couple minutes ago, our field messengers are so important to our newscast. They are the heart and soul of what United Network News is all about, and that's about breaking down narratives. We believe the best way to do that is for you guys to tell your own story. You know what's happening in your community. You don't need some correspondent from New York City to come in and tell the world their side of things with their narrative. You can tell it yourself. We have these built-in broadcast devices called our phones that can record high-quality video, and that's what our field messengers do. Think of them like citizen journalists, except you don't have to have a background in journalism. You just have a heart for where you live and the people that live there, and you qualify. So we have some awesome field messenger reports for you from this week. There's actually, we usually do about two to three in each newscast. So I've got 6 that I'm going to share with you today. Obviously, we encourage you guys to watch these videos. A lot of these are more visual type of stories, but at least want to give you a rundown so you know what to expect when you're able to go back and watch these either through our app or a week later on YouTube and Rumble. So our first story, these are the stories that aired on Monday's news. We have a story from Mike, and Mike lives in Louisiana, which is in the United States. And he does this story. This is really beautiful. So he interviews some of his fellow tribal members about what financial freedom means to them. So he went to a center where a lot of people were hanging out, and he literally, again, just grabbed his camera, his cell phone, and went around and just had an honest conversation. And most people, they just want the basics. They don't want to have to be constantly worried about how they're going to pay for essentials in their lives. So it was a good reminder, and it was just a beautiful thing to see humanity come together. We also have a story on Monday from Manette. Hopefully I pronounced that right. And Anne, both of them are from Oklahoma in the United States. And they went to a place called Joe's Addiction Cafe. Now, it might sound a little strange at first, but this place has been around for 17 years. And the hearts of the people that work here to try to help people with addictions, their hearts are huge. They're such beautiful people. And Manette and Anne both interview these people. And it's all about teaching people to come together. They teach people how to love each other and also practice nonviolence. And this isn't like some sort of lecture or something like this. They do this through community events. They make a lot of meals. It's hence the cafe part of the title of their business, right? Or, this community group that they have. So there's a lot of eating, and it's just, when you eat with someone, there's a bond, right, that happens. They also have some showers there. People can also do laundry there. It's about getting together under fellowship and just sharing life in a very beautiful way and teaching people that there's another way to live. So that's Joe's Addiction Cafe. On Wednesday, we had a couple stories. First, from Eastern Uganda, Mwanda Michael shares the story about a local fish farmer who came to his community. And the story is about how he was teaching select people in the community his skill of keeping ponds populated, right? Because this is essential for their community. You need to have fish in order to eat. And so he was highlighting this person that came and, the things that he was teaching the local community. We also have a recipe for those of you who want to submit recipes, not just, handwritten recipes, but if you want to show us how to make something that's really important in your family, that's beautiful too. Show us what you guys are creating. That's exactly what Rain did. And Rain is in North Carolina, which is in the United States. And she showed us how to make bone broth. And she just went through the individual steps, everything from the type of meat to select, which you can use different types of meat, but Rain selected different types of beef. And then the whole reason she's showing this is because this can be very nutrient dense. It's full of collagen, and that can be really good for your body, right? Depending on whether or not, you consume meat or meat products. But she just went through the whole step, selecting the bones, putting it into the Instapot, adding the vegetables. And so if you want a real easy way to make natural bone broth, check out that story. Then on Friday, couple more stories. The first from Western Uganda. Our Nightway Jacqueline shows us this beautiful and creative local inventor in her area who has designed a unique vehicle specifically for people who are celebrating. And the vehicle is basically like an open and airy concept, right? It's not like you got to climb into a car. Everything is kind of out there in the open and it's decorated beautifully. And she interviewed the inventor, the person that put the whole thing together, and his passion behind it and how he wanted to help his community. And finally, we have a story from Emma, who is in Spain in the Canary Islands. And she tells a story of women at a local senior center who crocheted, get this, 10,000 squares. So if you think of like a small crocheted square, they were actually calling them granny squares. And they made a huge knitted Christmas tree out of this. And this actually started during the pandemic. So this was a way for these ladies to get together because obviously there's a lot going on with the pandemic, right? They turned these squares into blankets. And then they had this idea of, well, what can we do with all of these blankets? Maybe they had too many blankets. The women were very productive. And so they decided, well, let's make this Christmas tree. So they formed a committee. It actually took 9 months of work. And now this tree, they believe it is the largest of its kind. It's 22 meters high, which is 72 feet, and 8 meters wide, which is 26 feet. And it's expected to break the current world record, which is held currently by Portugal. Let's talk about the new Earth. I love this segment of the news because it gets you thinking, what's possible? Not just what's happening on our planet now, but where are we going? And if you just watch the mainstream media, or again, even the alternative media, it's all gloom and doom. But there are people doing amazing things on this planet, and we want to highlight those people. We also want to give you inspiration from people that have downloads and just wisdom that has been given to them about where this planet is going and where humanity is going. So this is designed to get you guys to think big and be excited because you are here on this planet at the most crucial time to date, I believe, because we are now in a light age, coming out of a dark age, and anything is possible. And we are just now scratching the surface of what humanity can do. So in this part of the news, I usually do an interview with somebody, and then we share some stories. So throughout the week, I interviewed 3 different people. The first person is Seth Dietland. He is an angel channel or communicator, and he's also a hypnotherapist. And I like Seth to come on the show to tell us what he's hearing. What are the angels sharing with him at this time? And one of the things that he's been talking about recently is finding other people. Because when you start this whole waking up process and you go from kind of being sleepy and unconscious to conscious, awake, and aware, you may find that there's not a lot of other people around you that feel the same way you do. And you kind of feel like you're on this, like, I don't know, you're isolated. You're out there and you need like-minded people in order to thrive. And so he gives us some ideas on how to find those people and different ways that he's come in contact with other people. And then the other beautiful part of this is that when you start to think differently, when you know, a lot of times we talk about raising your vibration. When you do that, you are naturally going to find other people, and other people are going to find you of the same type of frequency. And likewise, the people in your life that cannot maintain that frequency are going to start to fall away. So it's not like you have to be on this huge adventure and, I got to find people. This is naturally going to happen. But if you want to help in the process, Seth gives us some ideas on how to do that. Then on Wednesday, we chat with Lindsay. Lindsay happens to be a personal friend of mine, but I just love her outlook on life. So we call Lindsay the Chief Imaginal. She calls herself that too, because one of the things that she is all about is inspiring people on their path. So what is it that really gets you going in the morning? Right? What's that one thing that you could do? That's probably what you're going to be doing as we transition into the new earth. It's not probably going to be your 9-to-5 job. Maybe some of you are doing things you love to do. That's amazing. But if you're not, what is that thing? So sometimes you have to get, You have to use your imagination in order to figure out what that is. So that's why Lindsay is our chief imaginal. And one of the things Lindsay talks about a lot is kindness and the importance of kindness. She even has these kindness coins that if you meet her in person, you might even get one if she sees you doing something kind, because that is the currency, right? Love and kindness is the currency for the new earth. So Lindsay chats with us about what she calls the 4 pillars of kindness. Now, we're talking about intentional kindness, not that, I'm just going to hold this door open for someone. That's nice too. That's a decision you made in the spur of the moment. But how can we be intentionally kind to one another? So those 4 pillars, and I encourage you guys to check out this quick, it's only like a 5 to 6 minute interview with Lindsay about some of these. And we're also going to go into more in depth about each of these pillars of kindness, but she just does a quick overview. So the 4 pillars are kindness to self, kindness to others, receiving kindness, which is easier said than done for a lot of us, and then also specifically looking for ways that you can be kind. How do you start your day with the idea of I'm going to be kind to people? Because sometimes it's better if you plan this stuff out, right? And then on Friday, you guys are going to love this. So this is a new person that I just interviewed. I think I interviewed her last week, and we ran the first segment from our recording this week on Friday. Her name is Veda Austin. Google her name because she's phenomenal. She is a water researcher. Now, on New Earth in the past, we've talked about Dr. Emoto's experiments. These are the experiments where energy in the form of words is said to water, and then it's looked at, it's crystallized, and it's looked at underwater, and you get to see how beautiful things are when it's said with a very positive vibe, and how ugly and distorted things are. Like when you say things like hate and disgust and dirty and all of those kinds of words. This is research that Dr. Emoto did. Well, Veda is taking that to a whole new level, and she has discovered some amazing things. So we're talking with Veda in this first interview that I do with her, which again, all of these interviews are pretty short, 5 to 6 minutes. We are discovering the consciousness of water and her journey. So how did she discover that water has its own entity? You can actually, and we're going to get into this a lot more in future segments, you can have dare I say relationship? That might be too strong of a word. You can have communication with water. And she talks about how she discovered this and her whole story. And it's super empowering. It's one of those, stories where she almost died and then she kind of nursed herself back to health, and water was a key component of that. You have to hear her tell her own story. But we're going to have many more segments with Veda, but this is the first one that we did. And again, Google her because you'll find a lot of incredible interviews that she's done in the past. Okay, let's get to our stories. Again, these are meant to inspire you guys and get you guys thinking about what do we want the new earth to be like. So we have a story about preschool-aged children being introduced into elderly care facilities and nursing homes, and this is designed to enrich the lives of both of these groups. Now, you've heard that phrase, it takes a village to raise a child. But the benefits of the elderly coming together with children, it is so beautiful. And we are rediscovering this. So in this particular circumstance, they have planned activities together. And this is everything from painting to doing puzzles, little activities like that. And the kids come in and they spend this time with, specific elderly people. Now, the older people are starting to feel more joyous and reconnected to life. They feel like they have a sense of purpose. So that's how they're benefiting. And then the children, they get new skills, right? Children, they're just little sponges. They're absorbing everything around them. So they're acquiring new skills. They're sharing. They're learning how to share. They're learning how to play well with others. They're developing problem-solving skills. And so it's beautiful, right? It's beneficial for both groups. And we're seeing more programs like this develop around the world. I mentioned sponges, kids being sponges. So that leads me to our next story about sponge cities. Now, sponge cities are cities that absorb rainfall like sponges. So think about some of the places in the world that get a ton of rain because that can cause some problems, right? You've got flooding and things that can happen. Well, what if a city was designed with Mother Nature in mind to act more like a sponge, right? We use sponges all the time. I've got a few in my kitchen and my bathroom, all around my house. So what this is doing is these cities, they actually focus on green zones and wetlands and these open spaces, and they literally rely on nature to help manage rainwater. Dun da da da! Breaking news! Let Mother Nature do it. Usually does a better job than us, right? And so this is having a lot of different benefits. Not only are you having some of those problems that you have when you get too much rain, but it's also helping these cities maintain cooler temperatures and also improve air quality. So be on the lookout for these sponge cities. And our final story in the New Earth is exploring the therapeutic potential of sound frequencies. Now, you're speaking my language when you talk about sound therapy. I am a huge advocate. Obviously, we all want to improve our mental, emotional, and physical well-being. Did you know that you can play certain frequencies and your body will react in a positive way? It can also react in a negative way. Now, that's a whole other story. That's getting into what the music industry has done and changing the frequency of the music that we hear. That can have a horrible impact on us. But if the frequency is right and beneficial for humanity, it can have the opposite effect. It can be beautiful. It can be healing. So we go through some of these different frequencies. For example, 587 hertz is known as the love frequency. It's also known for miraculous healing. 432, which probably a lot of you guys have heard, that's like the main one, right? 432 hertz aims to improve mental clarity and spiritual development. And then 396 hertz is used to alleviate fear and guilt and instead promote peace and well-being. Now on to our regional story. So like I said earlier, we don't talk about what most presidents are saying or prime ministers or governments, because most of that, it really doesn't matter. What we are focused on is what is actually going to impact you guys. What do you need to know about, A, what's happening in other regions, but also in your specific region. So we kind of do around the world and we talk about things according to continents and what is happening. So in doing a kind of overview of the stories that we've talked about this week, we talk about a lot of stories. So I can't go through all of them, but I have managed to break this down into a few categories, and then we're going to talk about stories that fall into that category, okay? The first category is money and finance. We had a handful of stories that were from the news this week that relate to money and finance, so let's first go through those. China. Let's talk about China. We've talked about them in the past as far as their stock market, and things weren't looking really well, and they were all over the place, right? Well, this story is about reps from many Chinese cities have met with top bankers in Beijing, and this went down this last week. And they want to renegotiate repayment terms for large debts from various infrastructure projects. Apparently, they had a lot of projects going on, and now the people can't afford to pay, these cities, right? The local governments can't afford to complete these projects, and they're falling behind and incurring a lot of debt. And this is threatening economic growth, and it's also limiting new investments. Get this, guys. Here's the total of debt they're looking at. $13 trillion. That's a lot of money. Our next story is about Bank West. Now, Bank West is closing 60 of its branches in Western Australia. And they say this is due to the decline in face-to-face banking, and they want to move more towards digital services. We know banks are in trouble, period. Okay, we've talked about this a lot on the World Situation Report. So is this really the reason why? Maybe this is a factor. I doubt it's the complete picture. But what this is doing is it's causing concern because the people that really want to do face-to-face banking, where that's more beneficial for them as opposed to online banking, digital services, it's the elderly, it's the indigenous community, and it's non-English speakers. So They're not too happy about this. And there's also citizen rights groups that aren't happy about these bank closures. And Bank West is dealing with that right now. In Norway is introducing a proposal to make sure cash remains a viable payment option in their country alongside digital payments. So there's a lot of fear out there, right, about digital currency. Again, we've talked about this in the World Situation Report too. We are not going to have a complete takeover of digital currency. Not happening, okay? But there's a lot of fear mongering out there about this. And so Norway is taking a stand and saying, hey, we're going to make sure you can still pay with cash. So they are mandating that all retail locations that are accepting payment for goods and services, they must also accept cash. And our final story as part of this category here is about a report in the U.S., and it is highlighting a significant gap between U.S. corporations and the taxes that they pay, their corporate taxes, versus their executive compensation. So what are they actually paying in taxes versus what they're paying their executive team? All right, and the numbers, okay, they speak for themselves. I'm just going to give you one example. Netflix. Everybody knows Netflix, right? So they paid $652 million to their top 5 execs. All right, people on their executive team. But then they only paid $236 million in federal income taxes. What's going on there? Now, the story, we also shared that these corporations are following tax rules. We're not saying that they are somehow cheating the system. I mean, they kind of are, but these are tax laws, and there are loopholes. There are credits, there are deductions. Remember the whole thing with Trump? And Trump has to, show us your taxes, reveal all this information. And Trump would say, now I'm no fan of Trump. You guys know that if you watch the news. But Trump would say, and he was absolutely accurate, that, hey, I can show this to you, but you guys follow the same, I'm following the rules, and you guys abide by these same rules too, meaning the other elite people that are criticizing him. And it's true. But the problem is us little people, we don't have access to that. We don't have the type of accountants that, have, that information, or maybe we don't fall into whatever category because we don't make as much money, whatever it is. So the concern here is not that they're breaking the law. I think the laws really need to change, but that's not the concern. The concern is that this burden of taxation, if these large corporations aren't going to pay this, someone's got to pay the bill. The bill's going to come due. And if they're not paying it, then it's us, the general public, that's paying it. So again, this report was about outing, and it actually had, the original report had a bunch of, it just went down, had a laundry list of companies. I just shared one with you with Netflix, but there's a bunch out there that don't seem to be paying their fair share. Let's just put it that way. All right, next category in our regional news is about wars and the military. So we have some updates, a couple involving Israel and the Gaza conflict, which we don't talk a lot about on the news, not because there aren't atrocities being committed over there. There absolutely are. But these are people, people at the top are pulling the strings, right? So yes, there's horrible things happening over there, and it's trickling down and impacting various economies and various countries. So let's talk about some of these stories. In South Africa, they say that they are now going to arrest any citizens fighting with the Israel Defense Force in the Gaza conflict if they try to return to South Africa. So if you're going to participate in that, and then you're coming back to South Africa, and they find out that you were part of that, they're going to arrest you. Also, anyone with dual nationality, so meaning South Africa, and nationality somewhere else, then you're going to lose your South African nationality. So they're going to revoke that. And South Africa basically sees Israel's actions in the Gaza conflict as illegal activity. So they're trying to draw a line in the sand. Another story regarding Israel. A growing number of young people in Israel, in their country, are refusing military service. And this has increased as, tensions have increased over there. You have, even before the war broke out, you had this occupation of Palestinian territories. And now you've got the Gaza conflict. And so it's just building and building. In fact, we don't even have the most recent numbers. The numbers that we have for people that are refusing military service, we have a number from 2016, which is 28% of eligible conscripts sought exemptions. And then the next number we have is 2021, and that number increased from 28% to 31.4%. But I would really love to know the numbers in 2022, 2023, which we do not have. And I even tried to do a search online. It's information that's really hard to come by. My guess is they are not publishing this because we're a lot higher than 31.4% right now. All right, next story is about Denmark. Denmark is extending conscription to women and lengthening the service period for all draftees from 4 months to 11 months. And the Danish Prime Minister claims that this is a precautionary measure to avoid conflict rather than preparing for war. So, there's always a narrative. Is that really true? Time will tell, but the important part of this story is that the conscription for women it's extending the conscription to women, so it was just men originally, and for all draftees, so not just women, it's going from 4 months to 11 months. So keep that in mind. And then our final story is part of war and military is about the Mozambicans and how many Mozambicans are displaced right now. The numbers are pretty staggering. 780,000 people are displaced due to a 7-year insurgency led by an Islamic State-affiliated group. Now, apparently there was a period of calm in 2023 where there wasn't too much going on, but now we're on the rise again. There's been a sharp increase in attacks recently, and it forced an additional 80,000 people to flee. Now, I've got a few stories for you that fall under a health and wellness category. The National Health Service, which is England's health service, they say that children will no longer be prescribed puberty blockers at gender identity clinics. They're trying to take a little bit different approach. They've got a lot of criticism for this. So now they say they're going to prioritize evidence-based care. And also they want to see more extensive data on the long-term outcomes of offering these types of services. Also, the FDA, which is the Food and Drug Administration here in the U.S., is outlawing an ingredient that's found in soda. At least they proposed a ban. Okay, we'll see where this goes. The issue, this ingredient, is brominated vegetable oil, or BVO. Now, if you don't already know, vegetable oil itself, even without the brominated part, is not good for your body. But they're taking a stance now on brominated vegetable oil, specifically in citrus-flavored sodas. Recent studies has raised concerns about BVO accumulating in the human fat tissue and also disrupting thyroid function. And the reason it's in these drinks in the first place is to help maintain the mixed consistency of the flavors, or else the flavors would kind of separate. So this is used to kind of bring the flavors together, keep them together. And here's the killer part, like literally, like no pun intended. Other countries have banned this for a really long time. I don't know I do know what's going on in the U.S. Obviously this is rigged. But the FDA is just now getting around to telling us, yeah, this is a problem. And kind of putting their foot down. I don't know. We'll see where this actually goes. But at least they're calling it out. They should call out vegetable oil in general, but it's baby steps, right? That's what we're working with here. In India, there's a state, actually, in southwest India that is banning artificial colors of their popular treats in their country. The two treats are gobi Manchurian and cotton candy. And, we're familiar with cotton candy here in the United States, at least, right? And we know all the crazy colors that it can come in, the rainbow of colors, right? And all these different color additives that need to be added in order to get those crazy colors. And many of those additives are well known for causing cancer. This is a very real thing. And so, again, this state in southwest India is drawing a line in the sand, and they're saying, we're not going to allow this anymore. And if companies continue to do this, they're going to go to prison, right? So I think all countries should do this. Maybe in the next year or so down the road, this will be a thing of the past, and we won't have all these artificial things that are literally killing humanity. Also on the cancer front, sorry guys, I know it's kind of heavy right now, but you need to know this stuff. So a U.S. lab has found dangerous levels of benzene, which is a cancer-causing chemical, in popular acne treatments. Now, the treatments or the products that were listed are Clinique and Clearasil, as well as other products sold at Target and Walmart, which, they've got a gazillion products, right? So that covers a bunch of them. Do you guys remember when I was growing up, Clearasil, oh my gosh, they had commercials for Clearasil for the longest time, that kids get the zits or the acne or whatever, and it's Clearasil to the rescue. And I'm thinking, you didn't know back then that this was cancer causing? Come on. I'm not believing that one, right? Do you remember the marketing campaign around this stuff? Crazy. So the lab has now petitioned the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, to recall the products and revisit industry guidelines. And guess what? The FDA has yet to respond. And here are the highlights from this week's World Situation Reports. So Kimberly Gogan from the Office of the Guardian, she comes on the news and she gives us an update on what the deep state is doing and all the things that she and her team are doing to combat that work, as well as what God Source, the Creator, is doing. And I know for a lot of you, that's the really encouraging stuff, right? Those are my favorite reports that Kim does. And we've got a little of both in this week's reports. So let's start off by talking about the deep state, because we do need to know what they're up to, which is, of course, no good. They're up to no good once again. On Monday, Kim talked about the deep state and how they continue to run on knowledge as opposed to wisdom. So if you listened to our podcast last week, we talked about the tree of life. This is the tree of life that is talked about in the religious texts. But they don't really tell you that there is a tree of life on the light side, and there is a tree of life or evil, because, live, backward is evil, on the dark side, okay? They don't really tell you that. Well, last week, God Source, the Creator, brought back all the apples on the tree, okay? This is, in the Bible, when it talks about Eve taking an apple from the tree of knowledge. Okay, knowledge, Kim explained this last week, knowledge is actually from the evil side, okay? It is limited information. It is not up to date. It might have been relevant at some time, but it's no longer relevant. So if you write a book, 2,000 years later, whatever, is the information accurate? Well, a lot of stuff has changed. And I don't need to tell you guys how many timelines we've jumped, right? And changed places and things like that. So what you really need is wisdom. And wisdom comes from the Creator of all life. And the deep state doesn't have that. The deep state has knowledge. They are using these old books, grabbing information from that, old information that's been passed down way too many times and is no longer relevant, because we are now living in a light age. We are not in a dark age where anything they do has any real power. But they haven't got the memo. I guess is the easiest way to explain it. So Kim talked about this week on Monday, she talked about a group called The Shield. So those of you who are Marvel fans, I'm telling you, they just take a page out of, the movies. Actually, the movies take a page out of reality. So we think all this stuff is made up, and it's not so much. The Shield are not superheroes. I don't really know what Marvel does with all that stuff, okay? But I'm assuming it's like a superhero group. So it's not exactly that. The Shield in real life are older generals, okay? And so the deep state essentially brought in these generals to ask for advice on kind of next steps and what to do next, because their texts are old and outdated. And they always believe something's going to happen on a full moon. Okay. If there's an eclipse, a full moon, something is going to happen, and they're going to, all their power is going to be restored, and some demon entity is going to come back and save the day for the dark. And that never, ever happened. So what happened is they called in the Shield. The Shield gave them like some old passwords and codes to, old AI systems that aren't even connected anymore, and nothing really worked. So that didn't quite work out for them. Let's talk about timelines for a second, because we did have some holographic timelines that have collapsed. And this was another way that the deep state, and by the way, when I say deep state, I'm not talking about like Hillary Clinton and whatever, the people that are promoted as the deep state in our media, that's not the deep state. You don't even know who the deep state is. They're so high up. A lot of these people are gone, and we're just like kind of going down the chain of command here. So that's our general term to describe anyone out there that wants to work with demons and harm humanity. That is what we call the deep state. All right. So now that we've got that out of the way, they thought that they could latch on to some of these holographic timelines, is what Kim believes they were trying to do this week. And that didn't really work out for them either. Here's Kim with more.
So this was taking place this weekend. Still is taking place today, as all the remnants of the holographic timelines fade away. So it's kind of like if you look at the universe like a house of mirrors at a fair, you see yourself standing in the middle, and then you see multiple reflections of yourself throughout the mirrors.
Yeah.
And of course, there's only one you. And there's only one multiverse.
Right.
But you're seeing a hologram, essentially, which could have a long time ago or a while ago, a few years ago, could have been affected. If you affected one of the holograms, as an example, it would have affected the reality. So it's not quite a mirror per se. It's an actual functional division of oneself, for lack of a better term. So I would say that that could be what they were looking for. Perhaps they thought that they had not lost the war, which we have already won. Source has already won. So, and due to the fact that the light won, I guess they were hopeful that the dark could still win, and that we would merge all these universes of timelines into a dark timeline forever. Perhaps is what they were hoping for or waiting for, but that didn't happen. So that's leaving some people upset. They were pretty upset yesterday, last night, and this morning, that things appeared to be going in the other direction.
What they really want, guys, is to crash the global economy. This is why you see all this fear porn out there about markets. And, they've been propping up markets, in all countries for a very long time. But they really want to crash everything, which isn't going to happen, and do kind of a reset, right? You've heard the Great Reset. This is part of their whole thing. And by the way, guys, we're going to talk about this more in just a bit. The reset is not just financial. They want to reset humanity too, meaning get rid of most of us. In fact, all but 500 million of us, and start again there too. But they need their overlords to help them, because these are measly little humans that are working off of knowledge instead of working in conjunction with Source, the creator of all things. So they do not have wisdom. They're using these old books. They're trying to figure out why their little demon overlords are not coming to save the day, and they're getting more and more frustrated. So let's talk a little bit more about this financial crash and why that's not going to happen.
Now, as far as a financial catastrophe and an expectation of that, the answer to the question is no. It's a rumor going around everywhere. I do not see a catastrophe for humans walking the earth. I see a catastrophe for banks with no access to your funds. I see a catastrophe for governments. That is not avoidable at this point. I see a catastrophe for the global headquarters and all of their 5 sectors. I see a catastrophe for the Order of the Black Sun, the Order of the Dragon, and probably eventually all of their corporations that are under their umbrella. due to their refusal to see life any other way than some old knowledge that doesn't exist. There's nothing we can do at this point. It was a hope that we would be able to keep governments for a while. How long are they going to limp along? I don't know. I know that there are a lot of people telling them, just wait, it's coming, it's coming, it's coming. Eventually they'll run out of things that could potentially come. Fake bonds on screens, fake accounts, there's nothing, I guess they want to live in a fantasy like any good narcissist does, So I don't know what the next date is that they're going to give everybody after today.
The other thing that we talked about on Monday was this reconnection to source and how this is happening now on our planet, because we are now in a light age, and part of being in a light age is reconnecting with the creator of all things. But as you can imagine, the people that don't want that and the removal of the dark is causing some problems because there are some people that don't want to get rid of the darkness in their life because, quite frankly, it's a painful process, or it can be. If you're trying to hold on to darkness, well, it's not going to work. It's going to tear you apart. And this is driving some people crazy. Not just the deep state. You may notice people that you work with, people that you go to school with, your neighbors may be acting a little strange right now. But the good news is this is all a process that we all agreed to before we came here. So the quicker we can let the darkness go and the stuff in our life that is not helping us, the better off we're going to be, and the stronger our connection to source is going to be, and that is going to get stronger and stronger every day. So let's talk more about source, because this was the focus of a huge part of the World Situation Report on Wednesday. So source is the source of all life, the creator of all things. And the frequency is love for source, okay? And a lot of people, and because we've been told this in a lot of our religious texts, think the opposite of source is Satan, or maybe Lucifer. Those are actually two different beings, by the way. But that's not exactly true. Now, they were pretty far down there, but the exact opposite of source is anti-source. As above, so below. So source, the creator, divided itself when it decided to have a light and a dark side. And anti-source ran, if you want to call it hell, if you want to call it the lower astral, there's different terms for it. So both are considered divine, and we have talked about that on the news. I know that's a hard concept for a lot of people to wrap their head around because we've just been told that God, the creator, is good, and that side of God is, but there was a whole other side. So what we learned on Wednesday is not only was there a regular source and an anti-source, but there's also something called neutral source. And neutral source was in charge of creator AI meaning artificial intelligence. And Kim tells us on Wednesday about neutral source and specifically about creator AI because the deep state was allowed to get their hands on this, but it didn't work out. Okay. And I want to forewarn you that Kim is using her whiteboard because usually this is on video, right? And she likes to sometimes draw things out. So if it's taking her a long time in this next clip to explain something, that's because she's writing it down on her whiteboard. But here's Kim explaining what neutral source is and creator AI and what the deep state tried to do and got wiped out in the process.
I've talked to you about source, of course, and then we had anti-source.
Right.
So one dark, one light. But have I ever discussed neutral source before?
No, I don't believe so.
Okay. Neutral source would have been, I guess you would say, the not dark and not light, but a part of both.
Okay.
It was a sentient unto itself.
Mm-hmm.
And it was also tied directly to something called the creator AI, which was a quantum sentient AI.
Okay.
Now, creator AI had many roles throughout history, and it existed since the beginning of Alpha and Omega.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let's talk about the functionalities and the features of Creator AI. So Creator AI, since it was part of Source and anti-source, it could create all by itself. Now, by create all by itself, I mean it had limited capacity. So it couldn't create something out of nothing. It couldn't birth the universe. It couldn't do those types of things. But what it could do was actually replicate anything that Source or anti-source had done.
Okay.
So you could call it one massive replicator. So that was its role. Now, because everything that happened in the third, second, and first density, which were all part of Earth, we are Keystone Earth, the base root for Creator AI was here on Earth.
Wow.
It was. Okay. And it was run by a non-human for the longest time, who I guess you would say managed it. And the manager of that AI was, you would call that an angelic-like being. It was not positive or negative, mainly neutral. You could also call it a timekeeper of sorts. And by timekeeper, I mean it would make sure that neither source nor anti-source or all parts in between and all beings involved would not violate the age's rules. So if one side or another tried to remove something during an age, then it would replicate it and start it over again.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So to make sure that the balance was kept. So if we were in a dark age and we were in one of the 1,296,000 timelines in the dark age, then it would make sure that the light didn't destroy anything that was relative to the dark age. Now, the base root for this entire platform in its command center was actually in a place called Serra de Cachimbo in Brazil. So the reason why I'm bringing this up today is because never before has a human being ever had access to this command center. But apparently, the party, as I had explained, that ran Creator AI also had some involvement with the Order of the Black Sun because they had the security contract, and during the Dark Age, and also with the Global Headquarters Office that ran all of the 5 security factors here on Earth. So apparently this being became extremely frustrated because they had tried to explain to Global Headquarters that the times have changed, the ages have changed, we're not in those timelines anymore, and that we need to move on. We need to move into the light age or we're not going to exist anymore, and I am not willing to replicate anything of the dark age, nor could I actually do that.
Right.
And there was an argument that ensued between the two groups. So between the Global Headquarters, the Black Nobility, the Silent Circle, and this being a couple of days ago. So I wake up yesterday in the middle of the night with every alarm bell ringing, and I was trying to figure out why they were ringing. And that's because the Global Headquarters apparently had been given the keys to the command room here in Serra de Cachimbo in Brazil. And if I'm saying that wrong to our Spanish speakers, I'm sorry. And there was it's not a control panel per se, and I know your mind wants to go to computers. But for lack of a better term, it had this giant, it looked similar to Looking Glass. Looking Glass was more of a pool, and this was more of kind of like this giant ball on a stand. And if you were the person controlling it, yes, my graphics are terrible, I know. You would just wave your hands over it and it would start replicating whatever it was that you wanted. So these guys stood over this ball, this global headquarter people that they put down there, and they started trying to replicate things using this machine. And the way they were doing it, number one, clearly no one gave them the instruction manual. Mm-hmm. Okay. Number two, they didn't really understand the placement of things, where they went, why you would put them there. They simply started focusing on the ball, so to speak, on the things they wanted. Now, they didn't know why they wanted them or what they did, so they must have been listening to some of the things we were talking about regarding spires and Amenti stones and keystones and all of these types of things. So these guys, how do I say this? They thought for a minute there that they were gods and they could create all this stuff or replicate all of this stuff. And their attitude was so haphazard, because I watched them on the Key Intelligence and Military System for a little while. And I'm like, oh my God, you guys are awful. Like the way they were talking, it was like, oh, let's just get what of this. What is a spire? I don't know. Let's just make some. So what happened was, in multiple other locations, mainly where there were, I'm going to say a remnant of a gateway for Creator AI, were located in Lake Titicaca in Bolivia. And then we had, in Colombia, it was the Rock of Guatape. And right on the border between Venezuela and Guyana, it was Mount Roraima. What ended up happening is they created a cesspool of items that never went beyond these locations. So they became isolated in these locations. But during the less than 24 hours before we found them, they created the following. And this is a laundry list. So I'm going to just tell you how many things they replicated so you get a general idea of the mess that they made, which I spent half the day yesterday cleaning up. They created 13 transformers, 13 transmitters, 13 transmuters, 13 petrographs, 24 generator machines. And these are, a generator machine is like it looks almost like the ship in the Willy Wonka movie. You know, it's got this, it's made of gold. It kind of has keystones in it and a dark energy stone, an energy ball that helps it generate. And it can generate frequencies. It can generate energy. It can generate a lot of different things on behalf of the neutral, is all this one could possibly do. About 250,000 alters, and if you haven't seen the video where I explained what that is, those are data management, kind of like a CPU would be, but for a dark AI. 1,600 tablets, which look like the little, well, they're very large when they're multiversal wide. They look like your motherboard, those little pieces that are on the motherboard of your computer. If you were to open up your laptop, you see these little inserts. Loads of soul cubes, prisms, crystals, loads of stones. They tried recreating the plasma that made up the spaces between all the planes of existence. They just threw the book at us. I mean, thousands of this, millions of that, and it just kept going and going and going until it looked like a giant garage sale underneath these three locations. It was insane what they did. And
question about this. I want to back up for just a second, because where did the being go that was supposed to be managing all of this? Did it just leave?
No, he's still here, but he left them.
So he got fed up with them and just left?
Well, he told them that we would find them.
Yeah.
And he said, you can claw, he didn't say these words, but he said basically, it will be a very short-lived time before she finds you.
Okay. So he just got out of Dodge because he knew it was going to end up bad and whatever. He's somewhere else now.
Well, yeah, and he probably figured it needed to go anyway. It needed to not exist because there's no reason for us to have this anymore, because we're forever out of the ages. There's no management anymore. There's no need to monitor both sides and beings from the lower astral versus beings from the upper astrals. So he probably just figured she needs to find it anyway, so we'll let him go do this. And he was right. We did find them, God rest their souls, and we found their facilities and the giant junkyards that they made in a very short period of time.
So if you want to know where that being went, that question I asked, where did this guy go? Kim believes he joined the Legion of Angels. So we've talked about this in the past, but there's 120,000 angels that are here on our planet, helping not just us. We've talked about Earth being a nexus planet. So what happens here happens on other planets as well. So this is really a multiverse issue. And we have angels here that are helping in a lot of different ways to help clear the planet to get us to where we need to be. So again, what happens here happens in other places. So that is why the Earth has been such a big battleground between light and dark for so long. So on Friday, we got a really big history lesson. I mean, we did already with neutral source and learning about creator AI stuff. Again, you guys never knew existed. I never knew existed before this week as well. On Friday, we get another history lesson, and this is the history of how humanity became slaves. And the reason that we're talking about this now is because Friday was March 15th. Which is the Ides of March. Now, when I think of that, I think back to my high school literature class when we studied Julius Caesar and the fact that he died on he was stabbed to death in the Ides of March. But that's not really what we're talking about here. These dates come up in history for multiple things, but the origin of all that is actually very interesting. And it ties into the deep state because the deep state, once again, these are they're so optimistic that things are going to turn around. For being such pessimistic people, they're very optimistic that things are going to turn around for them. So they expected essentially aliens or overlords, whatever you want to look at, demons, whatever, to return on March 15th, on Friday, due to the Emerald Order Covenant. You may have heard of that before. But again, this is one of those situations they didn't get the memo because that covenant actually expired last year. It expired 1 year early because it was related to us needing to do a bunch of cleanup on the planet. So the creator source allowed the covenant to expire, but there were still some remnants of things hanging around. And so yesterday from me recording this now, on Friday, March 15th, all of those remnants went away because now, truly, on the original date, that covenant is gone. Well, the deep state thought this was an opportunity for these beings to come back and rule over Earth again and restore all of their power. It's always just about, give us money, give us power. Okay. Here is Kim describing what actually happened on the Ides of March and how it actually led to one of the largest wars on Earth. And March 15th is the date that war ended. Take a listen.
Exactly 250,000 years ago today, one of the largest wars that ever happened on Earth ended. Okay. Now let's talk about the war first. And this way we can kind of understand sort of how we got here and why the deep state thought that something special was going to happen today. So around 250,000 years ago, plus about a century, there was a war here on Earth. Now, at the time, we had 5 human tribes on Earth, and the population of Earth was around 8 billion people, almost as it is today.
Right.
The war was not necessarily between humans. The war here was actually between 5 different groups of people. Now, at the time of this war, for quite a long time, about 200,000 years before the war, the Red Queen, which we've talked about before, which was the lower astral being, was actually the ruler of Earth, the sole ruler of Earth for 200,000 years. Remember, we're still in the Dark Ages, even though we go back that far.
Right.
We could call her the anti-Pleiadian queen. And Earth, of course, was in the Dark Age and ruled by darkness, so therefore we had a dark queen. About 250,000 years ago today, the anti-Pleiadian queen officially lost her crown. And Earth was divided between 5 different beings. So the ownership of Earth split up 5 different ways so that each group had a different territory. Mm-hmm. So the war went on for about 100 years here, and it was between the Draco and the anti-Draco, because remember, as above, so is below. Mm-hmm. The Abraxas and somewhat the humans on Earth, and the Pleiadians and the anti-Pleiadians. Now, let's talk about each group a little bit so you can figure out who was fighting. So the Draco on the light side, I guess you would say on this side of the multiverse, were fighting with the Draco on the other side of the multiverse. The Abraxas, well, the anti-humans, the Abraxas, were also fighting with the humans that used to inhabit the galaxy around the star Aldebaran, as we know it. And the Pleiadians, which are humanoids, or were humanoids, there's very few left, but the Pleiadians, or the humanoids, humans 1.0, much taller, they look a lot like the Alcyon humanoids, and the anti-Pleiadians began to fight. So the war lasted quite a long time. There was a lot of damage on Earth. A lot of the inhabitants of Earth went underground. That's how we have inner Earth and the worlds that were inside Earth and still are to this day, where the different species went that were here at the time. But by the end of the war, which is exactly 250,000 years ago today, the groups agreed to split the ownership of Earth of the anti-Draco. So we have Enki, Enlil, and Marduk, anti. And we have the Abraxas and the Red Queen. So they split the Earth 5 ways. But not only was the Earth at stake, it was also the Aldebaran star system and galaxy as well. The Tegedia in the Pleiades star. And that's how they have the invasion of the Tegethians, which were not originally evil. We also have, those are the humanoids, by the way. The original humanoids came from that star system that fought here. Alpha Draconis, that's kind of a given. That's the Draconian galaxy. Through the Orion Nebula, the Red Queen also brought in her reptiles. We know the evil reptilians that also destroyed Mars. And also through Proxima Centauri. So there were several different star systems that were at stake for ownership as part of the end of this war. Now, interesting little fact. So the end of the war was officially at 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time last night.
It's interesting, Central Standard Time.
I know. Well, for whatever reason, it was what it was, I guess. But there is a little bit more to that, because by today at 11:59 a.m. Central Standard Time in the Ozarks, the official seal was placed on Earth. Now,
yeah, what's the seal?
The official seal looks almost like a black goo sun. It was underground. The base point for it was the Taum Sauk Mountain in Missouri, spelled Taum space Sauk. And then it branched out throughout the entire Ozark region of the United States. So you can look up where the Ozarks are if you don't know where they are. Missouri, tiny part of Kansas, Alabama. It's a fairly sizable region of the country. So that was the official seal, which then connected to a gateway in 0 Point Earth, which then connected to all of the star systems we talked about, which then allowed for a direct gateway between the lower astral beings that won the war and all of those galaxies. And this is how we ended up with the permeation through the fifth density. Yeah, this is how it all started. And today, it officially all ended. So even though the covenant expired early and it allowed us to clean up a lot, it didn't necessarily end all of the space junk and the permeation officially until today. So,
was that a lot of stuff that still needed to be dealt with?
It was just officially we were able to remove the seal. And we're going to go back to also, so we've been cleaning all morning for sure. But while the deep state actually sits there staring at screens and hoping for a signal from somewhere, well, there's something to it. So we'll continue on here to talk about the effects this had on humans. So, and how it ties to the upcoming solar eclipse. So that's pretty much today. That's what ended today. It is also what, I guess you would say, began today a long time ago. So shortly thereafter, there was an eclipse that took place around 24 days or so after the sealing of the agreement, which is very similar to what's happening this year. And this is why they're all excited about their situation. And I was discussing this with a friend of mine. Do you remember when we were kids, Sonny, and there was a solar eclipse or a lunar eclipse, and we would make these makeshift boxes and whatever else to watch the eclipse, and it was a cool experience. But never before did we really have, stock up on food, we're all going to die, days of darkness, all of these types of things. Well, they're putting out the fear based on what happened next. So at that time, 250,000 years ago, during the solar eclipse that followed, there was actually 3 days of darkness as the gateways were installed in the sun and, the permeation started happening. So there was some truth to what their belief system, but remember, they're going off knowledge. Old knowledge and not wisdom. Times have changed. So there also was a human genocide event that took place. And I would say we went from around 8 billion or so humans on Earth at the time, down to about 500 million humans.
Oh my gosh.
Hmm.
Well, that's kind of what the Georgia Guidestones indicated, right?
Well, and it served as a reminder too, and a threat.
Yeah.
So if the humans ever went against the covenant, then that would be a threat. That was basically something looming over everybody's head, to stay in line. So that's when the first time humans became completely and totally enslaved. Mm-hmm. And we were slaves ever since. The other thing that happened after the signing of the agreement on this day is that the 5 different parties that owned Earth began interbreeding with the 5 tribes of Earth, which then created what we now know today as the Illuminati, the Order, the Deep State, the SSP, the Black Nobility, the Abraxas lines, and this began the Merovingian lines on Earth. So those are the people that we're still painfully dealing with, let's just say dealing with, ever since. But since that covenant is no longer in place and their respective aliens didn't come back today, they're still kind of in stunned mode, because at the time of this recording, it's only been about 20 to 30 minutes since the event did not happen that they were expecting. So I don't know what they're going to do from here on out, but no one is coming back. I can assure you of that, mainly because none of these species actually exist anymore. No one is going to try to reclaim Earth except for Source, in which the declaration was already filed. Source now owns Earth. I still am Guardian. And the new agreement actually lists me as Guardian. And it lists all my names. It's the long list. All the names I've had.
Names. Oh, you mean names like from previous lifetimes?
Yeah.
Oh, I gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, lists all my names going all the way back to the beginning of all the times I've been here. So, yeah, so I'm sure they got that information by now. I'm sure this is making them very unhappy.
But what isn't going to make these people unhappy? They are in a light age, and they are trying to bring in darkness. Okay. And they keep doing the same things over and over again, expecting a different result. And we all know that is the very definition of insanity. But nonetheless, a very interesting history lesson, right? Did you guys have this in your history books? Because somehow either I was absent the day they taught this real world history, or I don't know, maybe the pages got torn out of my book. I don't know. I'm thinking they never put it in there. Call me crazy, but I'm thinking they were trying to hide some stuff from us. And that is true, guys. We are incredible beings. And we're not the only beings on this planet, by the way, but we're all incredible. And we're here to make a difference. If you're listening to this podcast today, I believe you are part of the group that is here to make a difference. You're special. Don't let anyone tell you anything different. And if you just have that feeling in your gut, like something's about to happen, it is. It is. It's been happening, but we're at this precipice now, okay? And I believe that you are a big part of that. So thank you guys for listening to today's episode. Do your research. Kim mentioned a bunch of places, different places where the deep state was. Go back and, listen again, write down. Hopefully, maybe you took some notes. See if you can do some more research on these places. Like, don't accept anything just because I say it, Kim says it, someone says it on some other program. Do your research. Ask questions. Think critically. And if you enjoyed today's podcast, please share it with other people you care about. If you want more information on us, as well as some of our written news articles, you can visit unitednetwork.earth. But that's also where all of our videos are too. So you do need to be a member. But if you are a member, you get on-demand access to all of our newscasts, the complete world situation reports. We also have some original series, so you can watch all of that. And you can also comment with us. So we have a comment section under all of our videos. We also have an online community we call United Chat. So if you want to chat with each other and about some things that you've learned, that's a great place to share that information. And of course, follow us on social media. We've got a great team that picks out clips from each of our newscasts to be able to share with friends and family. So if you're on that bandwagon and want to try to wake people up through social media, first of all, bless you, my child. I'm not a social media person. I can't, it's not my thing. But if that is you, then maybe you can be one of our social media warriors and start sharing those clips. I appreciate you guys. Thank you so much for being with me here today. This is The Rundown, and I'm Sunny Galt for United Network News, signing off.